Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And welcome to another edition of Takeover Tuesday. I am your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro, and we've got an amazing program for you tonight and a great broadcast. We're just in a few minutes going to be joined by the Spinsters of Horror, Kelly and Jessica. They took over Instagram all day today, did an amazing amount of posts and stories, all kinds of things, and we're going to get into a whole range of topics today and a whole lots of information about upcoming projects they have coming up, which is super interesting. If you want to hear things about or if you want to hear about horror films from a different perspective, please keep listening or watch this episode, because that's what we're going to try and give you today. So, but before we get there, just a quick update, a quick news update from all of us at Black Fawn Distro. Of course, we have a lot of things going on right now, including lots of merchandise that's actually launching in the Black Fawn Distribution store. So you can head on over to blackfawndistribution.com and check us out there. We've actually just launched our Retro Bite re-release of Bite, which I'm just going to throw up on the screen right now. It's actually available in Sunrise locations all over Canada, and that's with a retro slip that we actually put together with the fine folks over at Small Dog Design. And the artwork that you see there, that was an original artwork designed by Fiction Design, our friends over there. So kind of a collaboration of sorts, three small businesses getting together. And speaking of which, we also have Bite shirts featuring this retro VHS artwork on sale at blackfawndistribution.com. So there is lots of people asking us about the Black Fawn Distribution coffee. Let me get to that. So we have shipments coming in this week. There was a little bit of a delay on our end. However, we will be getting those back in, or we will be receiving those orders this week, and they'll be shipping out this week as well. So thanks everyone for their support. You are definitely supporting a small business. And you know what? Deadly Grounds Coffee, if you haven't tried them, they are the most badass coffee company in the country. And they operate out of the Durham region. You can absolutely try them out at their cafe, which is located there, which they have a whole range of amazing treats and coffee deliciousness. So check them out. And what we're going to do is we figured, hey, listen, let's play a quick commercial and just give them a little bit of a shout out, because they've done so much work for us and getting this blend out. And again, it's the Black Fawn Distribution Deadly Grounds coffee blend in conjunction with Deadly Grounds. It's called Appetite for Caffeination, Sweet Toffee O' Mine. A little bit of a rock and roll GNR reference there. And hey, let's hear a few words from them. And then right after the break, we'll talk to Jessica and Kelly, the Spinsters of Horror.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. We have very active lifestyles. It's not all wandering the countryside aimlessly or scaring passing motorists. And we all love a good cup of joe. And there's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. Bold, robust, delicious. It's coffee that can wake the dead. With over a dozen different roasts and flavors, Deadly Grounds can satisfy the most finicky of coffee addicts. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for, and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
And we're back with another episode of Black Fawn Distro's Takeover Tuesday. Welcome to the program. I'm so excited for this episode. Kelly and Jessica from the Spinsters of Horror. They are the Spinsters of Horror. They are the hosts of an amazing podcast called I Spit on Your Podcast. And they are also the captains, the helmers, they have a whole range of projects going on right now, and they're popping up absolutely everywhere. They're just coming up to, or I think, just coming up to the 3-year anniversary of their of the whole project. So we're going to dive right into that. But hey, Kelly, Jess, welcome to the program. Thanks again for doing everything today.
Thanks so much. Hi, thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this since you asked us. I think it was last week. So yeah, hell yeah. I love you guys. We've hung out together, so this is really fun to do this hanging out together.
Yeah, Jess, not so much. She's just here contractually, right? Yeah.
Well, Jess sadly lives in Ottawa, and I'm in Toronto, so I'm I'm in it. Because all of us are, here in the GTA. So
yeah, I have the small Ottawa horror community, which I have yet to meet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you know what? Listen, we know it takes a lot of effort to kind of program the Instagram all day, as well as to do this interview at the tail end. It's a whole day commitment. So we really do appreciate both of you being here with us. And let's dive into this, because it was funny, because when I really started researching exactly how much stuff you had coming up, it's a whole thing, right? And it's not just a podcast. It's got a few tentacles coming out of it that are sort of touching a lot of different audiences and a lot of different formats. But what can you tell us, like, just for people just tuning in who maybe aren't familiar with the podcast or don't know either one of you? Tell us about, sort of like the genesis of the project, where it started from. You're both long-term friends, known each other for over 2 decades now. Tell us a bit how did the Spinsters of Horror come to be, and how did you decide to start it off with the podcast?
Jess gave birth to this project. So
oh my goodness.
I usually let her start. This is her horror like baby.
This
human child.
Or my spawn. Yes. I need a Cole's Notes version of this, but I had a horror podcast that I was doing before, went defunct, didn't go well. But I still wanted to talk about horror. I still wanted to engage in the community, especially because I was inspired by so many other people who were having really great conversations about the various themes of horror, because that's what I'm interested in. So I went to Kelly and I said, I know you don't know much about podcasts and you're new to them, but you've been listening to this other one that I've been doing, and you're my friend, and you've been supportive, and you've been a horror fan for like 20 something plus years, 25 years I know now, but do you want to do a horror podcast with me? And then she came up to visit me. I was just after I separated from my husband of 10 years. And so she came up to visit me. We sat down with a glass of wine and started brainstorming ideas, names for the project itself, what we wanted to do, and then the podcast. Kelly came up with the name. I spit up on your podcast. Oh my god,
a baby reference. Jeez,
this got in my mind. I literally had just visited my nieces, so I just had children. For the last couple of days. So, but yes, Kelly came up with the name I Spit on Your Podcast, and it's been history since. Just
So it's been a whirlwind.
And I'm always interested in this from a personal point of view, but how long did it take you to come up with a name for either one? So essentially, Spinsters of Horror is sort of the banner. Everything else falls underneath that, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Absolutely. We have pages. My brain is always going with ideas and names of things and just coming up with shit. And I'd pages of things and be I think I developed, had a bunch of pages, came to Jess, was I have all of these ideas. And I don't know, Jess just was okay, I kind of where we're going with this. We kind of have similar ideas. And how about this? We wanted something that maybe had horror in the name, that kind of just showcased this is going to be a horror project. And then she's how about Spinsters of Horror? Because prior to this, I used to make fun of Jess for a long time about being this little lady with her cats and her little teacup and saucer and her shawl and knitting. And it was a joke, but then it became our entire lives. It's Spinsters. We're Spinsters, unconventional women. We love horror movies. So
exactly.
And then I started your podcast was because I love a play on words. I love references. And I went to my movie collection and I was all right, what can I play around with here that makes sense, in the realm of a podcast? And I went with I Spit on Your Podcast because it's a little taboo. It's a little bit bold. Jess hadn't seen the movie yet, so that was also a risk. But yeah, it was kind of like a punch in the face, and it kind of tells you exactly what we're about.
Here's a movie, Jess. You have to watch it because we're naming our podcast after it.
Yeah,
pretty much. And we did. We watched it. Yeah. We watched it for
episode.
Yeah, episode 5.
So what I've watched obviously a few episodes, and I love when both of you get in on a topic, on a couple of movies. We're going to get to a couple of those later on in the broadcast for sure. But I love the back and forth that you both have with one another, and you are it's friendly, but it's definitely decisive. Like it's not, or I won't say decisive, but it's you don't back down from your opinions, which I find very, very interesting. And it's even, and I, Kelly, I feel like you're more sort of like, no, this is the way it is. And Jess is like, yeah, but I just don't agree with that. So
that is exactly what she says all the time. Yeah, but I can see where you're coming from. And she's very sweet.
Did that naturally come about from before when you were friends and just kind of watching horror movies and hanging out, or did that something that did sort of develop after you started the podcast?
Oh, I feel like that was like our cadence as friends already. Yeah. Like Kelly has always been like the bold out there and like her opinions known, and that's it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm with you, but like let's see the other side of it, right? And I'm like I'm like the softer tone person at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that just it's our natural cadence, and then it just comes out more, especially when we talk about things and we get very passionate about what we're talking about. So right,
and who doesn't get passionate talking about movies, and especially horror movies? Everyone I know, for that matter. So just a quick heads up to anyone tuning in right now: if you have any comments or questions for either Kelly or Jess, leave them down in the comment section below on Facebook. We are broadcasting live to Facebook Live as well as to Twitch and our YouTube channel. But if you throw your comments down below or questions, we'll try and get to them during the broadcast and throw them up on the screen and get some answers for you. So let's jump into now. I might have boxed myself in here because I did send an email saying, hey, is there anything you guys would like to kind of promote on the show? And Kelly sent me like a laundry list of upcoming projects. Which I was like, wow, this is crazy. But let's talk about, you do have a very interesting project tying into the podcast, which is a live podcast coming up. And that's in conjunction with a presentation of the movie The Witch, where you'll be talking about that. I think that's happening on July 23rd.
Yes, Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern time through the Satanic Estate. So over like the last 8 months, we've talked about Satan and Satanism multiple times, and the Satanist community has fully embraced and welcomed us into their community. And we are currently not yet Satanists. I can say that for myself anyways. The more I research it, I was like, yeah, no, I'm into this. But we did our first festival appearance for Final Girls Berlin Film Festival in January, and we decided on the topic satanic feminism, and that kind of just started this. Yeah, it kind of blew up and started this downward spiral, I guess, upward, whatever, an ascension, descension. But we talked a bit about Satanism in October of last year, and then with that episode, people loved it. We went to some interesting places. We loved doing it. We loved learning about it. And yeah, the satanic community fully embraced us. And we were absolutely, absolutely honored and very humbled to be asked to do a live presentation or a live podcast episode for them. They have a big kind of unveiling event at the end of the month for their new Baphomet statue for the Satanic Temple. And we get to talk about The Witch, one of Jess and I's favorite movies.
So it's interesting because The Witch has come up on a couple of other episodes of this show. It always seems to kind of come up for the way it creates atmosphere. What specifically do you love about that film? And was that something they came to you with and said, hey, do you want to do a thing on The Witch? Or did they say, come down here, get online, pick a movie, let's do it? Or how did you decide on that film?
They came to us and they said, you kind of like, you have carte blanche as long as it's related to Satan and Satanism and, and what you want to discuss. And they were, the woman who contacted us, she said, I really loved your conversation on the witch and your satanic feminism episode. And we and just, it was so great and so empowering. And Kelly and I realized, so when we were planning for this, we're like, we actually haven't like done an episode where we talk about the witch. We guessed it on like in our first year of our podcast, the Dead Ringers podcast. We talked about the witch with the crew there. And then we talked a little bit about it in our satanic feminism episode, but like we didn't get enough time. And because it's such a film that we love so much, we're like, no, we'll do what Kelly said. Kelly hates deep dive into the witch and talk more about it. And so, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we already had a bunch of notes already for it. Like that was left over that we didn't get a chance to really get into because we talked about 4 movies in the Satanic Feminism episode. So we had like 20 minutes, let's say, per movie to talk about. And there's so much in The Witch to talk about. So we're like, yeah, we haven't actually spent an incredible amount of time on The Witch. We love it. We talk about it all the time, like in our own personal lives. Let's just do The Witch. And they loved it. They loved that idea. So.
Yeah, one of the things we just had on the last episode, we had Laura Meservey, who is a horror writer as well, and we were talking about that. And one of the things that I heard, I think it's on one of the special features for the film, but is in the script. There was a lot of references to smells of that era and how and how accurate, how historically accurate it was when it was written. And they actually had a historian come on and say, yeah, this is kind of exactly what it would be like. It's a fascinating movie and obviously some great performances in there too. I think that was Anya Taylor-Joy's first movie. I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure too. Yeah.
Yeah. And now she's, I think she said she wasn't sure about acting after that film, but now she's, I mean, if she hasn't blown up already, I think she's on the cusp of becoming like a really, really famous actress because she's good in everything she's in. Right. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk like one of the things I know you guys are passionate about is diversity in film. We just got out of Pride Month, obviously. That was a big focus for the program on your end as far as like drawing attention to diversity in film. How do we build that? And obviously that ties back to women in film and that sort of thing. But let's talk about building better diversity in film. And one of the things I've heard, I mean, the question is like, what can we do? What do we need more of? And it's just more. We need more voices at the table, more representation. But how do you? That's slowly happening in film right now. I think we see it. Whether or not it's as fast as we want it to be, probably not. But how would do you have any thoughts on how to speed that up as far as like? I mean, I know it's a big question, but any things that come to mind as far as like how the industry could do better in broadening the diversity in film?
I would say for us, let's say Jess and I as podcasters and writers, not filmmakers, that's not our industry. We're in this industry, I guess you could call it. So what we can do is elevate and support those voices, the LGBTQ community, the, people of color, just all of the diversity that is out there in horror. And yes, I agree that it's way, way too slow. And so we showcased, and what we talked about pretty much the entire month of Pride, all of June, was Brad Michael Elmore's Bit from 2019. Severely underrated, intersectional, feminist, super fun, like teen girl gang vampire movie. And so we're just like, well, that is the first movie ever, horror and whatever, to have a trans character played by a trans person. That is massive. That came out in 2019. The first movie ever, horror or not. So that's massive. Brad Michael Elmore is a very white straight man, but look what he did. And he did tons of research, talked to a lot of people. Nicole Maines was the lead in that film and did a lot of research to make sure that this movie was going to be, I want to say not offensive, but you know what I mean? Like appropriate and well received. And it's still kind of scary. And I mean, is it okay for him to tell somebody else's story? I think so. Do people do the research that he did? Probably not. But we support that film because he did something literally nobody else has done. And so, just in our little industry, in our little niche that we're doing, our small group of followers and whatnot, we're showcasing these films. We're talking about these voices. And that's really important. So that's what I think what we can do, like Jess and I as a podcasters and writers, that we can elevate those voices. In the industry, fucking hire these people. You know what I mean? That's it.
Well, film in general is supposed to be and is a collaborative process. And on past episodes we've talked about I mean, people have heard me say this before, but I love the idea of Black filmmakers making horror movies and women making horror movies and just different people, because I've seen all the movies that white dudes can make too. And I'm not saying that that good movies still aren't going to come out, but I think the more voices you have at the table, the more it's more of a there's more selection, right? And you're going to see some stuff and hear some stories that aren't necessarily going to be that are going to be brand new. I mean, I think one criticism from all films is that, when was the last time you saw a movie that really blew you away? When was the last time you saw a movie that was like, I have no idea what's going to happen in this film?
Yeah.
And that happens. I don't feel that happens too often anymore. But I definitely get it from the horror. The horror genre seems to be taking maybe the most chances right now out of anyone making films, as far as what I've seen. But I don't know. Would you guys care to comment on that?
What I would want to add on to that is, who knows about horror and horrific experiences? It's marginalized folks. Let them tell some really horrific stories, like His House. Holy shit. That was released on Netflix, I think, last year. Anyways, that was a little add-on. Jess, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, the same thing is just taking risk on different scripts and stuff like that are coming in that are outside of the norm of what has usually been produced or mainstream and stuff like that. Like, I feel like that's where it's happening in indie films. Like, in the indie stream of things, people are taking more risks to do different types of themes, genres, areas, and mashing all things together, and then just putting out a film and then really pumping it up for the audience to really latch onto it and then connecting also, like with Kelly was saying, with like the community in terms of like the podcasters, the writers and stuff like that, and having us like have our voices added to it. Right. I think one of the most important things that came out of BIT and the talk about it being like trans representation was that everyone who wrote about it when it came out were just like, this is amazing. This is trans representation done right, finally, right? And these were all people within the horror community. These are all horror journalists, podcasters, all that, just raising the voices. And I just feel like, take more risk, hire people to do these things, talk with more marginalized individuals, allow them to tell their stories, and just connect in with all the communities and be intersectional among all your communities to share these things and push them out.
Yeah, and I mean, I always say, like, a good movie is a good movie is a good movie. Doesn't really matter who makes it. Is it interesting? Is it is it gonna I mean, movies are. I mean, yes, there's a subsection of movies that are going to tell you something and tell something important. There's also a subsection of movies that are just going to be for entertainment value. But either way, I mean, I think that I'm excited for like the next decade to see kind of what comes out.
Yeah.
Because there's a few buzz movies that get mentioned all the time, and I feel like there needs to be more past that. I'm wondering if this movie you're talking, it's BIT, right? So whether or not that maybe got lost in the shuffle being 2019, and because 2020 was kind of a bit of a write-off, because some movies take some time to sort of percolate through the internet, so to speak, and film festivals and that sort of thing. So I'm wondering if it'll get a second life once we come out of the pandemic, or maybe on streaming. Do you know where you can check it out?
It's for free on Tubi or rent it on YouTube for Canadians anyways. Sorry, I don't, for Americans, I'm not sure, but that might still generally be the case.
But that was exactly the story, was it got lost in the shuffle because of the pandemic, and it just went straight to VOD, and then they just didn't know how to advertise it. Right. And so it's been the horror community being like, and I feel like we've been doing it with all kinds of films throughout the pandemic. We're just like, once again, like, all the films just went to like all the Marvel universe and all the all that stuff. And it was all that noise, those types of mainstream films. And then once again, the horror community had to fight even harder to be like, no, there's a bunch of really great horror movies coming out. Everyone check these out as they're coming out, because the mainstream audiences we're not getting the same attention we would have, like, if it was just a normal, if we weren't in a pandemic.
So this leads me, we're going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, because I did watch some of your recent other guest appearances on other programs. And Kelly, you mentioned something that I thought was kind of interesting, because I don't know how I actually feel about it. But that was subsections of horror, and how horror movies are sort of misrepresented as thrillers, or they're not, like, I think I can't remember all the examples, but the one example that stuck with me was Silence of the Lambs. And yeah, it's a psychological thriller when in fact it's a horror movie. But is that not a way to is that an easy way to, so on one hand I agree with you, on the other hand I kind of feel like, isn't that a way to get people it's a gateway movie into the genre, and isn't it better to get people sort of moseying on down that lane, or does it need to be a purist in the sense of a horror movie is a horror movie?
I see both ways of this, and here is a little not horror related example. There is this fantastic chain of, it's called Cinnaholic. Okay, it is an all vegan cinnamon bun brand. Okay, do they advertise as being vegan? No, because unfortunately, if you label it vegan, you're gonna ostracize alienate other people, because they're gonna think, ooh, vegan, what does that really mean? That's not going to be very good. What would a vegan cinnamon bun be like? Whatever. Everything is vegan in there, but they don't label it as such. They don't, they don't promote it. They don't advertise it as such. So right. I hope this analogy makes sense. So I understand where they're coming from, but as a vegan, I'm just like, yeah, man, just throw your vegan brand out there, because that's nothing to be ashamed of. Okay. Horror is not to be ashamed of. And yeah, it was Get Out called a social thriller, psychological thriller for Silence of the Lambs. Could it be used to get people in the door? I think some people. Overall, no, because those people are going to think, oh, well, that's not a horror movie. That's a psychological thriller. Get Out is a social thriller. Parasite is a black comedy. And then if they go to maybe check out another movie that they see may be interested in, and it's labeled horror, they're gonna be like, oh, well, I don't really like horror movies, because all they do is just like kill a bunch of people, and I'm not really into that. You see what I mean?
That's I mean, on a personal level, that's an experience that I've gone through. Whereas, like, if you're trying to market a movie and you market it as a horror movie, you'll get less people checking it out, unfortunately. And the other movie that comes to mind that always it fits that dynamic is Sixth Sense, which is years old, made in the 90s, right? But when it came out, people were like, oh, like, you got to go see Sixth Sense, and then everyone went to see it. So I'm always on the fence, but I thought it was interesting. I just wanted to bring it up just to kind of get your take on that, because I think that it's the more money those movies make, the more potential they have to make more films like it, right? So if Get Out makes a ton of money, if Get Out isn't the hit that it is, does Jordan Peele win the Oscar? Does he even make Us, et cetera, et cetera? So I'm always curious, right? So maybe we'll find that out one day, but probably not on this broadcast, right? So I just want to jump on just a couple of comments here. We got a bunch of people tuning in right now. We were just talking about this individual like a few minutes before we went on air, but Kelly McNeely says metal sign.
Love you, Kelly.
And a friend of the show as well, who's asked a bunch of questions before, but Jamara says the same thing. So double horns up. That's pretty awesome. There we go. So we've got some questions. So let me see here. Okay. So let's go. Let's take a step backwards here. Kelly. So, hey, y'all, I know Jess is a crafty spinster. What's her favorite thing she's ever made? Into both, what's your essential go-to best horror textbook?
All right.
All right, Jess, you start first there.
All right. So my favorite thing that I've ever made was I used to make these like little miniature coffins of like various like horrific scenes and stuff like that. And one of my favorite ones is Cthulhu based. So it's literally just a coffin. I painted like an old sea chest, and I've molded out like tentacles coming out of it, and it's really cute. I love it. So I like to like make like little horror miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
But I have
You're
no
really
more
good
room in
at
my
them too.
apartment. Yeah, I have.
They're great. They're so adorable and spooky.
So just we got another question here from a friend of the show, John. He's an avid follower of ours, but he said, "Hello, ladies. What movie or movies got you into horror?" For him, it was Return of the Living Dead and Jaws, and then he discovered 80s slashers, which I think is kind of mostly how we all kind of got into horror, I think, in some roundabout way. But any movies off the top of your head you could throw out there?
Kelly?
Can I just quickly jump back to Kelly's secondary question, which was our favorite like go-to textbook on
I'm
horror?
sorry,
That's
John.
okay.
John, hold on a
That's
second.
okay. We'll come back to John.
We'll
come back to
there
John.
We go. Okay.
What?
I forgot that Kelly McNeely asked.
It was a two-parter.
Two-parter, yeah. One of my absolute favorite books is Barbara Creed's A Monstrous Feminine. Just absolutely fantastic, interesting ideas in that book. And so that's usually like a go-to for me. And then my other favorite woman that writes like academic, interesting, smart books is Alex West. And I have both of her books, one on New French Extremity, and she's like the only one that's written a book on it. And the other one on the 1990s teen horror cycle, because that is my favorite time.
Okay.
Yeah. And
yes.
For me, the very first book, and it was Andrew Subasati who got me onto it, was Canadian Horror, which is all the essays about all the various elements of Canadian horror. I wish I could remember the name off the top of my head, but that's my favorite one. And then right now I'm reading Alison Pierce, Women Make Horror, which I'm really enjoying because it's all about behind the scenes and the directors and the writers and all those people involved creating these all these women involved creating these horror movies. I really like hearing their stories.
Awesome. Okay, is that enough for you, Kelly? Okay, yes, she says yes. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, let's flip it back to John. I'm sorry, John. I got too excited there. I pressed the wrong button. So and moved on too quickly. But so John just wanted to know kind of what movies sort of got you into horror, and I guess 80s slashers kind of he got that into that, and that's how I got into horror too. But was that the same for you, or did you get in there through a different avenue? Jess
is relatively new. I'm going to say new in quotes because I think she's like pretty much an expert now, but newer if we're going to do comparatively. To movies. Yeah. So what movie? I'll have Jess start with that one. What movies got you into horror?
What movies got me into horror? Well, like the first movie I ever saw that was a horror that scared me was Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then that scared me. But then I never watched. Mm-hmm. I read more horror novels than I did anything watching movies because I had too much of an overactive imagination. But the one movie that really got me in that I was just like, no, I want to have conversations. I want to talk about is The Changeling. That was the one where I was like, no, I'm really like Kelly would show me all kinds of different movies and stuff like that over the years that we would hang out because we had like this one horror movie rule whenever I visit her. But it was definitely The Changeling. I love films from the 1970s. Those are my favorite. But then I used to watch like a lot of old black and white films like the 1940s and 50s and stuff like that. So like Dracula and Frankenstein, all the classic monster movies.
Okay. Awesome.
For me, as a very young person, I watched horror movies when I probably should not have, and hosted and attended many sleepovers with my girlfriends, and we would go and rent like 6 to 8 horror movies and pull all-nighters. Remember those when you were young and you could do it?
Oh, yeah.
And so some highlights from that were Pet Sematary, Hellraiser, The Exorcist, and Candyman in the 90s when I was older from then, not elementary school age. But so those were kind of like the handful of movies that started my obsession with horror.
Nice segue because Candyman 2 comes out, I think it's this month or next month or whenever it's rescheduled, right? So that's the direct sequel to the original, which is kind of cool. I just watched Candyman. It's funny, like I posted like last year I watched Candyman for the first time in a while. I picked up the Shout Factory version, and I just posted like some Instagram thing saying, hey, I'm watching Candyman, like whatever. And I guess that's got a massive following on Instagram.
It does.
And I had like there's like something like 300 likes or something. I was like, Jesus. Like, I don't even know 300
Pretty
people.
spectacular of a movie.
He still
amazing.
chills me to this day. Like to this day.
Yep.
No matter
When
how many times
I
I've seen it.
watched it for the first time, it's a great story. It's me and my friend. Yeah, I think we were in junior high. Maybe we were 10 or 11, and sitting like cuddled up under a blanket on the floor, watching it on like one of those big rear projection TVs in her bedroom. And it comes to the scene, and we're like terrified. It comes to the scene where the fucking hook comes through the mirror. We scream bloody murder. I hit the TV, shut it off. We could run screaming down the stairs. Her mother's just like, what is happening? And we're just like, oh, the mirror and the Candyman and the hook and the head. And we were just like all riled up. And eventually we calmed down, went back upstairs, covered the massive mirror in my friend's room, and finished the movie. And it became one of my all-time favorite horror movies.
I think it was, it was always, the mirror, right? It was like always like you say Candyman. I remember being in like public school and like kids going into the bathroom and turn the lights off and then like screaming and yelling and running. And yeah, it's and Tony Todd, what an amazing icon as far as horror movies go. And it's funny. It's like I was just having this conversation with somebody else the other day, and I always mention like and maybe we can just chat about this too, because I'm actually interested in what your thoughts are. But if we're talking about women heroes, like heroines in movies, I find it interesting because whenever we talk about, and this ties back to what you were saying, Kelly, about segmenting or not advertising horror movies as with what they are. But if you go down a list of saying, who are the strongest, female heroes in all of film, and at top of everyone's list, it's always like, it's Ripley and Alien, and Laurie Strode or Jamie Lee Curtis from Halloween, and Linda Hamilton from The Terminator, and like all those are typically they're all horror movies. And even if you look at the slashers, like The Final Girl, and there's a whole long list of heroines there. But I'm wondering, is that because so I started thinking about this, and it's like, is that because the villains are so good in horror movies? Because I feel that that's something that's kind of missing in these bigger blockbuster movies that are coming out, where there's no credible villains, and therefore credible villains don't create credible heroes.
That's actually a really good point. Because I mean, I think of it like, if you think of like Nightmare on Elm Street, like Freddy's an incredible villain, but then he's got incredible final girls that go up against him. I'm blanking. Nancy, Alice,
Alice,
right? Like and same thing in Hellraiser. You get Pinhead versus Christie. Like you get these but these villains are iconic and they're terrifying and scary. So the fact that these women are overcoming these evils, these personifications of evil, is really empowering. Whereas I just recently finally watched the last two Avengers movies just to be part of pulp culture, I guess, to get the reference. For sure. And I just found Thanos to be so underwhelming, and I just did not care. At the end of the day, I was like, I finished the movie, I'm like, nah, I did not care for any of this. Like I didn't, oh yeah, everyone's alive again.
I felt like at the end of the Avengers, at the end of Endgame, I was like, well done, it's a huge project. It's kind of the same thing as Lord of the Rings, right? It's like, nobody in their right mind would have thought about doing this in like the 60s or 70s. So, fantastic. I had a good time. I did watch Black Widow because I was, I felt I owed that to Scarlett Johansson, but again, it's just sort of like this, in bigger movies, there doesn't seem to be any, other than horror movies, there doesn't seem to be like women going up against these iconic villains, other than in the horror genre. And I wonder if that's I don't know. I'd love to talk about that for hours, but it's something I was trying to think of it. And I think the thing I thought about was, because I've always thought Linda Hamilton's arc in the Terminator movies is awesome. And she's such a badass by the end of it that it's just insane. And I remember I watched Terminator 1, and I think I was watching some of the special features or whatever. And I think it was the cinematographer that was saying like, yeah, we kind of shot this as a slasher. Like we shot this as a horror movie because it's just a robot hunting down this woman, right? Like that's the concept of the movie. Yeah. And then I was like, wow, that is a horror movie as well. Yeah. Like, insane, right? So I don't know. I started thinking about that. So I just wanted to know what you guys thought of, but
I honestly don't think the mainstream cinema is sometimes I feel is afraid to make their villains too evil. Like, you know, right? They're just afraid to push those boundaries. Whereas I feel like the horror genre doesn't. Like there's boundaries, but like they push them. You know, they make you feel uncomfortable, and you know, so that of course you're rooting for the final girl at the end. You're rooting for your protagonist because you want to overcome that very uncomfortable presence that's invaded your life or their lives too.
So that's an interesting point. So what about okay, because this is another thing too that I've kind of, I don't know why I've kept thinking about this, but
it's interesting.
But yeah, it is interesting. But the number of like female villains too, I think is, I mean, I can't think of that many off the top of my head. I can name you like 100 male villains, but female villains, it's tough. I mean, Dredd had a great female villain.
That's true. Yeah, she was.
And I can't think of anything off the top of my head. And I'm wondering is that because studios don't want to make people seem too evil, too mean? Do they think that women are incapable of being great villains? I don't know.
Unless it's Disney. Disney has no problem making women evil.
And
either killing women off or making them evil.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. I think they would much prefer us to be victims, as is reality. So it's maybe that's what it is. But also, again, horror industry is vastly still male dominated, and I think perhaps they'd rather just write bad guys. You know? Yeah, it's just cooler, right? It's just cooler to write, you know, fucking Mick Taylor in Wolf Creek.
Yeah.
He's really cool. He's kind of badass, and I'm not like rooting for him. He's just like so wonderfully wicked. So I get it. But like we've seen that before. So I would personally love some more, well, monstrous women. But when we do get these quote evil women, they're very interesting and complex. That's again where the horror industry horror movies go, is that when we do have bad girls and bad women, there's all these metaphors wrapped up into their vampires, their werewolves, or aliens. There's something otherworldly, which makes them a hell of a lot more interesting. So I mean, I kind of kudos for that, because I love those characters and I love those movies. So many of those are favorite movies of mine. So I mean, it's more interesting.
Okay, fair enough. Let's change gears a little bit here, because I wanted to get to, like we said at the top of the program, you have the Spinsters of Horror. That's the banner. You've got everything else underneath of it. You are both writers as well, which for those new to the Spinsters of Horror might not know. But you both also have articles coming out in Grimm magazine in an upcoming issue. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Yes, we do. Both of us in the same issue. We've been in it before, but not at the same time. So yeah, my piece is going to be on, it's called Death Becomes Her. And it's talking about two movies, Contracted and, I always mess this one up, Thanatomorphose. Oh Lord, it's a Canadian film.
Yep.
Anyways, and how both of those women, while they decay and die and rot, become empowered. And it was really interesting to me watching those movies and kind of dissecting them in that way, especially Thanatomorphose, which again, I think that's not how you say it.
Notice how I'm not going to correct you and try and say it myself.
No, it's okay. But I think I heard the director say it once and I was like, it's sticking in my head, but it has not. Anyways, but particularly loved that movie. It was really, really gross and well done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jess, what are you writing about?
The piece I have coming out is going to be about the contagion of indoctrination. So looking at indoctrination from cults through the films, The Invitation, and obviously Midsommar, and just kind of talking about how, like, despite their appearances, especially I have a little bit of a bone to pick with Midsommar. It's they're not ending up in good situations there. So, yeah.
Right.
The cults are like a disease infesting your entire body and being.
Cults are still bad.
Yeah, cults are bad.
No, that sounds fascinating. And where can people grab that issue when it hits? Is it available online? And it's a print publication as well out of Canada, I believe.
People will be able to get it. It'll be coming out in September. It's a September issue, and people will be able to get an electronic copy online at Anatomy of the Scream website. There's also, if you want to order a physical copy, the website is blurb.com, and that's where you can get the physical copy of the September issue, but like all issues of Grimm magazine, which I think everyone should pick up because they're all amazing.
Just in time for Halloween. Make sure you check out those articles, pick up that copy, and get yourself some advice as to what movies to watch on Halloween. Let's say Halloween falls on a weekend this year, right? So
I know
it was Sunday night this year, but last year, of course, it was Saturday night and no one could go out, right? So
not talking about that.
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up. That's it. Everyone just closes their computers down. Podcast over. Okay, well, let's just I just wanted to get into we have a section called Rapid Fire, and we're going to deviate right to that right now. I know I kind of give you a warning off the top before we landed on the air about this, but it's a series of rapid fire questions. It's going to be a little bit different this time because there's two guests this week as opposed to our usual one. And just to let everyone know, we are sponsored by Wellington Brewery, Hell's Lager, Hell's Yeah. They are an independent brewery out of Guelph, and I just cracked this and take a nice swig because it's my kind of halftime of the program.
Nice. I'm also drinking beer.
Delicious. Hell's Lager, Hell's Yeah. It's available from Wellington Brewery in your local LCBO, or if you're in the Guelph KW area, you can actually swing by the actual brewery on Woodlawn Road here in Guelph. They have a convenient walk-up window and a store there. You can purchase all of your Wellington beer needs. Great company. They keep us powered, usually on the road when we're at conventions and that sort of thing, but they also have kept us hydrated or dehydrated, whichever way you want to look at it, over the course of this pandemic. So we really want to thank them for their sponsorship of us. But okay, guys, rapid fire questions. Here we come. They're going to come fast and furious. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but are you ready? Ready to rumble?
Ready.
Okay.
Okay, so I picked out these questions specifically because I thought that they would be the best with two of you answering. So let's go. All right, so rapid fire, yes or no? Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors is better than Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
No. You have a whole Minnesota on that.
So I did watch that, and that's what gave me the idea. And I had to go back and watch. I had to go back and watch Nightmare on Elm Street 3 because I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I forgot Lawrence Fishburne was in that.
Yeah.
Morpheus. I was like a movie about dreams. Morpheus is in there. Amazing. Okay, so split decision on that one. So you got to pick one. The Spinsters of Horror have decided to make a super cool throwback vampire flick. Who's doing the soundtrack for it?
Twin Temple.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay.
I'm back that up. Yes. Let's sign on for that. Are people listening? Better, you make movies, don't you? Make a movie. Let's do it. Twin Temple.
Twin Temple. Twin Temple.
Well,
Satanic vampire film.
Satanic doo-wop film. Like, let's be honest.
This is another episodic related question, but respectfully, of course, is The Void the best Hellraiser flick made in the last 25 years?
Yes. Kelly's like,
I say yes as well. And that's just because
I'm trying to remember when the first one and the second one came out. So
the Hellraiser 3 was released in 92.
How many? Oh God, it's 2021. Okay.
We're old.
I would, you know what? With that question, I would say yes. I would, yes.
So
the
I know
Hellraiser movie to come out in the last 25 years.
I should be recording this.
Don't worry, we are.
Okay.
We are.
I'm just saying it's the better Hellraiser movie.
So I loved Hellraiser movies. Like that's like me and my buddies used to rent them, and and the first three are just amazing. I love I know the third one gets a lot of flack, but I love that scene when Pinhead's in the church. It's like maybe the best scene out of the whole series, but every time another Hellraiser came out, I'd always rent it, and they always get progressively worse.
I know. It's like somehow like impressive that
happened.
It's like, this is terrible. How do you get even worse? And then it does.
I didn't mind Inferno. Like I didn't mind it, but it's really, I think the backstory for that, it was like another movie. It was like a serial killer movie, and they said, well, we'll just take this movie and we'll just transform it into a Hellraiser movie. But that's why I like The Void. I watched The Void, and I kind of knew some of the backstory behind the special effects and that sort of stuff. But but I was just like, oh my God, a Hellraiser movie. That doesn't suck. Anyway, so and they haven't been able to reboot that either. So I'm just it's one of my favorites franchises. So okay, anyway, so what do you want? Rapid fire too. Is it Jessica and Kelly or Kelly and Jessica?
Jessica and Kelly.
Really? Okay. Kelly, Jessica.
Spinster number 1, Spinster number 2.
I guess, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And one last question. This is more specific to Kelly, but would you like to address the time that me and you clashed on the hardened blacktops of the Niagara Go-Kart Speedway in Niagara Falls? And just in case you've forgotten that, we do have a quick photo just to jog your memory. This is us on the track, ready for action. We are.
Yeah, you fucking knocked me out. I spun me right out, you dick.
So I think that was one of the first times we had hung out.
Yeah.
And I had just cut this corner, and I hit Kelly's back tire, and she spun out. And I remember as I was driving away, I like looked behind me, and she just looked at me, and I was like. Sorry, buddy. Later.
Name of the game. Yep.
I was like, she will probably never talk to me ever again.
Oh God, I totally forgot.
I had to bring that up. I was just like, where I looked for that photo for like 2 hours today. I was like, I know. I messaged G. I said, do you have that photo? And he goes, no, man, I have this other photo. And I was like, I know I have that photo somewhere. Let's just throw this back up one last second. There was there was also no alcohol.
Nope, absolutely not. We were very sober.
None.
The soberest I've ever been. Actually.
And no alcohol involved in the purchase of my sunglasses either. Multiple people have said, "Don't wear those, man. Don't wear those sunglasses." Anyway, okay. Well, that's it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for rapid fire. Just a quick kind of fun thing that we try to do. We try to keep it pretty light around here, but thanks for being such good sports about it. That's great. But let's jump in. We just kind of mentioned a couple things about that I wanted your opinion on. Was let's talk about new horror, and not necessarily new horror, but remakes and reboots, or rebootquels, or extended long time sequels, whatever you want to call them. What's the benefits and pitfalls? Are you guys fans of these iconic franchises kind of being resurrected? And which ones do you think work and which ones don't? And I don't know.
Sometimes. I don't care that much. Like, if it seems interesting overall as a movie, then I will see it. There are some movies that I hold very personally, and it's not a rational thing that I do. There's a couple that that have remakes like Martyrs that I will never watch, ever. But then I also said that about Black Christmas, and I have now watched all of the remakes. And I don't regret doing that. It was an interesting exercise, but it kind of just depends. It depends who's doing it. Like, well, Candyman's going to be a sequel, but it just depends on who's doing it. If you're bringing a new perspective, or you just do Psycho, where it's fucking just a shot by shot the same movie, and you add in a gross scene. Like, no, I don't want that. But frankly, and I know this is going to be a controversial opinion, but I prefer the Evil Dead remake to the Evil Dead original.
Oh man.
So I feel like sometimes fresh ideas can come in and they can play around with the general concept of an original film, but also don't remake a movie that came out, let's say 10, 15 years ago. Also, like, culturally, it's weird, like remaking a movie from like Japan and you're North American, because you lose a lot of very important unique cultural context. So that's my general opinion on that. Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, and I actually used to be against reboots and remakes. Like, I was like, no, I don't want to see a reboot or remake of any of my films that I really love and stuff like that. But then it was really Kelly who was like, if you really just like check it out, give it a chance. If you don't like it, you don't like it. If you love it, you need to know. And one of the things was, I'm a huge fan of the original Suspiria remake. Like, I love that film. So when they had the remake coming out in 2018, I was really not sure how I was going to feel about it. But I went and saw it, and I loved it. I loved the direction they also took it, and so that kind of opened my eyes to being like, sometimes these remakes do work because they're able to bring something new to the table, or something that they didn't explore before here in our grand scheme of things, and and they also may be able to do the effects that they weren't able to do then. So I'm interested in, like, I'm open to that as well. Like, but and I also like some of these newer sequels that are coming out. Like I'm really excited to see like the Candyman sequel, being it like almost like a direct sequel, from that, to see that story continue on through those characters who were involved, who were in the first one. So yeah, I'm ready to give remakes and reboots a chance. And I have been burned. The Craft remake,
whatever that thing was.
Whatever that was. Yeah. I was, because holding as everyone knows, Kelly and I, we hold the Craft movie like very, very close to our hearts. And when we saw that film, we were raging. But then of course,
I haven't seen it yet. But when there was like the pixie dust in the trailer, I was like, yeah, I don't know if people are going to like that.
And there's also like falling into the trap of looking very like 2020, because there is a look, there is a vibes to some of these more mainstream horror films that come out. So it's all about like, are you going to modernize it? Are you going to take an idea like Child's Play, let's say, late 80s killer doll film, and bring it into modern times, you know what I mean? Like updated for, the late 2010s. And I really, really enjoyed the Child's Play remake. It was very fresh, and it was fun, and it was brutal. And again, they kind of took a modernized take on it. Well, what if this happened now? Instead of trying to just rehash everything that already happened in the first one, they modernized it. They kind of updated it. So I think, for me anyways, that was successful.
And what about the movies that kind of... So I'm on the fence with this. Take Halloween, for example, the Halloween remake, which I liked. I liked the film, but there's something in me. I don't know if it's like a slight OCD or a completionist gene or whatever, but for when franchises say, so we're going to pretend that all the sequels didn't happen. And here's the real sequel 20 years later, which if you just watched Halloween 1 and the new Halloween, also, I don't like it when films are called just like the same title. Like, just call it something else. I get it's like they couldn't decide. It's like I feel like there was like 20 people and they all had a different idea, and they just said, we're just going to call it Halloween.
Halloween 2018.
Nobody will argue anymore. But I'm always hesitant about that. I mean, Candyman's kind of the same one, although those sequels sort of went straight to video, or quote unquote straight to video back in the day, which was frowned upon, I guess, or not really respected. But I mean, still some great movies out there. But I'm wondering if that'll be a trend that will continue because I do kind of want to see new horror movies though. And new, like, specifically maybe slashers too. But I just don't know if they're going to. I don't know if they're going to materialize. Although I do see good stuff all the time, it just doesn't seem like these iconic roles. I think it was just sort of that stuff is trapped in the 80s, and that's what people will try and remake, I guess.
They're trying to recapture the charm and everything of that time, and you just can't really do that. It's unfortunate. You can keep trying, but that was a moment in time, and you had to be there, or you missed out on it, and that's too bad. But I mean, there's tons and tons of, again, Jess brought up indie films, so there's a lot. If people are tired of reboots, sequels, yada yada yada, go to the indie stuff, man. Check the indie folks.
What's fascinating to me too is that new franchises haven't really been made. And I thought about this the other day because they're re-releasing the first Saw movie on 4K Blu-ray. And I mean, I like this. I love the first 3 Saw movies. I was like, these are awesome. You go and see them every Halloween, and it was like, this is the new horror franchise for this new generation of whatever. So whatever. I mean, they're not, whatever. I understand why people don't like them, but at the same time, that's kind of maybe the last franchise I could think of that was sort of that had that sort of feel to it, that it was like, this is going to be around for a while, right? I just don't know. Like, for instance, It Follows. I was blown away that didn't turn into that didn't even get a sequel. Like, I thought like all the rules were there, the world was there. I thought that's a movie I want to see more of, but it just,
I guess it depends on what you want. Like, I feel like the time of franchises and spending all this time and money and energy and commitment to a whole thing is just over. We had Scream, yes, we did the Saw, and then that's debatable whether or not Saw franchise is successful. I guess monetarily, financially, it was. But yeah, it kind of just depends on what you want in horror. Do you want a franchise? Hey, I love the Subspecies franchise, but nobody talks about that.
Yeah. I think the problem with Saw was that they made 3 and they were like, that's the story. It's like, what a sick trilogy. That does it. Role. And then some guy was like, why don't we just make more of them? And then like by the end of it, I was like, who's in on this shit, man? Like everyone, apparently, right?
Yeah.
It's like, like there was points where like I was like, I think it was number 5. I was like, who's this guy? Like I didn't even know who the guy was, right? Anyway.
Yeah. It's a little absurd.
Yeah, I just feel like it's like they're like, oh, let's just give them more guts and gore, these gore hounds of these horror fans. And we're like, wait,
sure.
We don't always want this. We want a good story too.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought this is a nice kind of tie into, because I felt that I would be remiss if we did not talk about this a little bit. But vampire flicks. Let's talk about, and the reason I want to talk about it is because speaking of reboots, I know that you did a Spinster versus Spinster, which is like a mini episode, right, of your podcast, where you discussed which was the best 80s vampire flick. Was it Lost Boys or was it Fright Night? And then I started thinking, I was like, I can't even remember how good I don't even remember if the Fright Night reboot or remake was good. Like I couldn't remember. I just remember like I laughed really hard when Colin Farrell comes over to ask for beers. And so I watched some of it, and it's actually, you know what? It's not bad. I think, I think some of that is because Anton Yelchin's in it, and there's just something that now connects me to like that guy. That's like, oh man, like, you know, I feel like he stuck around. In in a similar way, kind of to Corey Feldman, you know what I mean? Like, you know, when Corey Feldman was like, yeah, I liked him in all these movies, and then he reached a point where, but I really liked him. I really liked him in Friday 4, and that's what everyone says, right? So, But what are your thoughts on just vampire flicks in general? I got some favorites. I'm not a huge vampire guy, but I do like really well made vampire flicks. So let's talk.
Both Jess and I are huge vampire movie fans.
Yeah.
I know you are.
Yeah.
What I wanted to throw into the debate of the best 80s vampire movie was The Hunger, but we chose like 2 very popular, like kind of quintessential 80s, and The Hunger is in my top 5 vampire films.
Yeah, we both love The Hunger, so
love The Hunger. We've talked about that one.
That one's gonna have a remake coming out. I've heard that.
Boy.
Yeah.
If it's just like all queer all the time, then I'm down for it. It's some like excellent score and still makes it really beautiful. Okay, now I'm really just talking about the original. It's fine.
But there's not gonna be David Bowie in it, and that's one of the main draws.
Well, maybe he could be on the soundtrack, right? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Yeah, we have some David Bowie music. But vampire films. Again, there's not mainstream, no. Not really. We got to go to the indies. We got Byzantium, we got Bliss, and we got Bit. The triple Bs. The unholy trinity of 2010s vampire films.
Yeah.
I've just, Jess, I know you mentioned Bram Stoker's Dracula earlier in the hour. And that's a movie I recently revisited. I hadn't seen it in I don't know how long. And that's a great film. Like, I mean, the practical effects and just like the sets and the costumes and stuff like that. So I highly recommend, if you haven't seen it in 4K, it's like, so I'm on this big 4K kick and watching older movies now. It's like watching them for the first time. It's incredible. Right. So, but that one. And I have a huge hankering to watch Interview with a Vampire.
That's a good one.
I just haven't got around to it. But But speaking of which, just my own 2 cents, Kelly, I think, maybe it was Jess that you said vampires sometimes don't come across as scary. Like there's very few scary vampires in modern cinema. But I would say for me, 30 Days a Night, I loved the vampires in that movie.
Oh yeah, those are scary. Yeah,
with such a religious and anti-religious undertone to it. Anyway.
Give me some monstrous vampires. I'm going to shout out Stakeland by Jim Mickle because fantastic, big little film that was very ambitious, but those vampires are monsters. Like, I love our sexy romantic ones. Yeah. I, of course, love those. Who doesn't? But I also like when they're monstrous and I don't get that a lot. So when it happens, I kind of cherish it a little bit.
Okay. Awesome. Let's just jump into the comments here. Now we've gone over an hour. So this is, we're approaching like the longest podcast of all time, longest Takeover Tuesday interview of all time. So if you guys have to go, let me know. Please, we want to be respectful of your time as well. You've already given us enough of it today, but let's just take a look.
Yeah, what we got?
Okay. We got a quick comment here. Yes, finally, someone else thinks the movie will get is better too.
I get the original is a classic. I get it, groovy. It's Bruce Campbell. It's super fun. I actually watched that later in my life. My parents showed it to me. It was like a movie night with my family because my mom's like, I remember this coming out in theater and it was terrifying. Like my mom went to see it in the theater. She's like, it's terrifying. I'm like, okay, mom. They watched it. I'm like, oh no. That's not scary. This is comical. This is a comedy. This is a horror comedy. And I love the new one because, hey, we're taking out Bruce Campbell and giving me Jane Levy, and I will praise her in that movie. It was grim, brutal, buckets, raining blood with the chainsaw. Okay. Anyways.
Well, yeah. The Evil Dead franchise is known for a lot of blood, so it makes sense that the remake would have like buckets of blood.
So good. Yeah.
And just a quick follow-up comment from John as well. He just said Rose Armitage in Get Out was a pretty good villain. So
you know what? Yeah, that's
true.
She was a good villain.
Oof,
so
yeah.
Good stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay, so listen, before we go, let's jump. I just wanted to, again, I know you had a few things to promote tonight, and I want to get to all of them.
Sure.
But Kelly, you've got a really kind of cool project coming up too, which is I'm not sure if it was both of you on this, so correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry, Jess, in advance. But your Visceral Pleasure and Extreme Cinema event. What can you tell us about that coming up?
Boop, boop.
So a subset, I'll say a subgenre of Spinsters of Horror is my Taboo Terrors, which started about 2 years ago, where I write and podcast about, let's say, controversial, disturbing films that I have grown to absolutely love and adore. So, you think that the horror genre is male dominated? Holy moly. The extreme cinema world is even more so. And they are intense, those dudes. Just look at a comment section somewhere, or don't. You know what? Just don't. I've done it.
Yeah, I probably won't.
So there is it is a niche subgenre of horror, these movies, and even more niche are the women that love it. So I thought this year, to celebrate 2 years of Taboo Terrors, I would bring all of my lady brethren together to talk about it. So on Saturday, July 31st, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern time, I'm hosting 3 panels about extreme horror and extreme cinema. I'm working on hopefully doing a screening of a disturbing, interesting film later that night. That's still in the works. But just bringing women together to talk about this genre that they enjoy. So the first panel at 3 p.m. is Disturbing Films for a Curious Mind, which actually Jess is going to host, and I'll be in the panel. Because we do a couple of mini-sodes where I show Jess some classic disturbing films. Next up is Sallow. Can't wait for that. See how long Jess lasts.
Is there a bell? Is there a bell or a buzzer that you tap, Jess, once you get to a certain point? Or
I'm allowed to tap out. Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not going to force somebody to watch it. It can be very disturbing, and I've made some errors in the years of recommending movies to Jess where I felt really bad. So we'll talk about, it's kind of films for the newcomer. The 5 p.m. Eastern panel is women of and in extreme horror. So filmmakers, practical effects artists, actors, podcasters, writers coming together to, talk about what it's like to be us in the genre and why do we like it? Do we get any flack? Like what is it like to be in the industry? And then our 8 p.m. Eastern panel is extreme cinema, the genre, the controversy, and a bunch of us talking about why do people hate the genre? Why do they insult it? Why is it such a reviled genre? And why do we love it? Why are we drawn to these very transgressive, controversial films like a Serbian film, Trauma, August Underground, and stuff like that? So I'm very excited about this because all my panels are now full. I just got to confirm a couple of things, but it should be great and I'm really excited. Yeah,
that sounds fascinating. Just from having talking about perspectives and different people looking at different things and hearing it Yeah, that's very, very cool for sure.
Mhm.
So make sure you check that out. And also, I just wanted, before we let you go, we've talked about all the stuff that you like, all the stuff that you love, your love for everything from extreme cinema to classic 80s slashers, writing, everything in between, soundtracks. But what's next for the Spinsters of Horror? Like, where do you see the program? How do you see the program? Or I guess it's not necessarily a program; it's more of a project now, or an entity. How do you see
an empire?
An empire, an empire.
A
How do you see
cats.
yeah. How do you see that expanding in the future? I mean, you've done 3 years. That's your first chunk. Where's the next 3 years?
Oh,
What do you think,
wow.
Jess?
We've got discussions. Like, I know we have plans ahead of us, but I
More writing. Really,
More
it's all about
writing.
exposure. Like, and I think it's for anyone that has any kind of like creative work. It's about exposure and networking and stuff like that. I mean, January is our first ever like live podcast at a festival. So I'd love to do more festivals. I'm like refreshing the Salem Horror Fest website every day. And I'm like, let me know when I can do an online podcast. Let me know, can we go there? You know what I mean? So
yeah.
writing, it's kind of, we're trying to spend this year of like writing to get our, increase our exposure, but writing for different outlets. Like Jess just got this really great gig, Jess, for Last Girls.
I write a quarterly column for Last Girls Club where I get to write any of my ideas I want, and it's all around the horror and the macabre topics and stuff like that. And yeah, so like spinning off from what Kelly was saying, just more writing, putting more ideas out there, pitching to more of the wonderful organizations and groups that people that we support and who have supported us, and doing that way. I know Kelly keeps growing things with Taboo Terrors. I have my Monstrous Feminine editorial series that I've been working on, but I also want to continue with my horror game streaming. So I do the Spectral Streamer on Twitch, where I stream myself playing horror video games, and I either scream or laugh, or people laugh at me. It's fun.
And I drink.
And Kelly drinks.
Awesome. Well, listen, thanks so much for coming on the program again. One of the things we wanted to do was we just kind of started this because everyone was stuck indoors, and we just needed something to do, but it's kind of turned into something else. And we just figured it's always great to use whatever platform we have to kind of give a voice to other people out there. And, we've known each other for a while. We always see each other, or at least me and Kelly see each other on go-kart tracks across the country. But thanks so much for taking the time, and I hope everyone checks out all the projects that you have coming up. So again, can you just list them down again for our audience? We got Grim Magazine coming out, and just the dates and stuff.
For sure. The Satanic Estate, where we explore the witch, is coming out. I'm looking at a calendar that helps me. Friday, July 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We'll have our next podcast episode coming out on the 31st, where we have our first crossover episode with Gracie from Good Morning Nancy, an excellent, lovely bunch of ladies over there talking about horror over a cup of coffee, feminist podcast talking about horror movies. Okay, so that'll be on the 31st. Taboo Terrors, Visceral Pleasure and Extreme Cinema Day of Panels is on July 31st. What else we got, Jess?
I'm just streaming Alien Isolation right now on Twitch Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. And I think that's what I have right now. I know we've got some other stuff coming up. We've got a bunch of things. Oh, wait. We have a Spinster versus Spinster, Prom Night versus Prom Night 2. We're going to have a conversation about that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. We love our Spinster versus Spinster minisodes. We just have a good time with it.
Yeah. So that will be coming out too this month as well. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. So lots going on. Well, again, I know it's a huge time commitment to do this. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, clearly, to host Takeover Tuesday. I know everyone actually enjoyed all the posts today, and I'm sure you'll get some great feedback, and hopefully our audience can tune into some of the events that you have coming up. Stick around just after we go off the air. Okay. We'll just do a little bit of a post-mortem, but again, just my sign off. Listen, you can follow Spinsters of Horror and Black Fawn Distro on Instagram, at Spinsters of Horror and at Black Fawn Distro. And Kelly, people can follow you on Twitter as well, and Facebook.
Yes. Yeah. So Twitter it's at Horror Spinsters. We have a Facebook page, Spinsters of Horror, but we have a really special Facebook group called the Spinsters of Horror Coven, where there's some exclusive content that we throw in there, fun, like interacting, engaging with us. So please join us on our coven.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. Thanks. Didn't want to forget that. So, but hey, thanks everyone for tuning in for another edition of Takeover Tuesday. Just our quick words of advice. Please stay safe and help out. We're almost there, kids. Okay. So please wear your mask if you need to, get your shot, practice social distancing if it's required. But most importantly, check in on your family and friends. Make sure everyone's doing okay. We're all in this together. We're all in the same circumstance. And it's extremely important that we kind of pull everyone out of this horrible 18-month to 2-year pandemic nonsense, whatever you want to call it. Let's get to the other side and we can get back to doing some really cool stuff like in-person hangouts. And hey, maybe we'll do something like this live too at some point. Live in go-karts, right? All right.
I would take both
super
on.
sober.
Oh my God, no.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. And Kelly and Jess and Kelly, Spinsters of Horror, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.